Hey you guys, how are you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you guys so much for tuning back into another one. Today's video, I want to hop on the Connor Bedard hype train and I want to talk about which teams I would be okay with Connor Bedard going to. So I'm going to list, going off the league currently right now, the bottom 10 teams and just give my opinions on which team I'd obviously like him to go to. There's a few that I kind of am iffy on and I don't think I'd be a big fan of him going to. But there's a few, like my team, that I would be stoked on him going to. I also have some new lighting here. I turned on one of the lights above me. I got like 4 lights in this room and I usually turn them off for the videos and just have the background. I had somebody comment on my video saying to turn on the lights. So I'm experimenting here. I got one on here. I think it makes it way brighter for the foreground and then the background still kind of is dark and you can still see the blue lights. And I like lights, okay? That's why I have the blue lights going back there. I had to keep it. If you guys would like to see more hockey content, then it would mean a lot if you guys showed support on this video. One of my biggest things, like I've been kind of struggling with content lately. One of my biggest things this year, I kept saying to myself, is that I really wanted to focus more on just hockey content as much as I do jersey content. So like for example, I do have another tier list coming out for jerseys tomorrow or maybe the next day, so you guys can stay tuned for that. But I do want to mix in some actual hockey content here on the channel as well and talk about players, trades, and just all that good stuff. So with that said, let's hop into it. So I'm going off the standings today. Like the Vancouver Canucks play today and I think some other teams play today, so these standings will switch, but I'm just going off the bottom 10 as of right now. So in last place we have the Anaheim Ducks, and I'm going to be honest, I think I'd be okay with Connor Bedard going to Anaheim. I wouldn't be like jumping for joy, obviously, but I think I'd be okay with it. I think him and Zegras could be nasty. Same with Troy Terry. They have some good defensive prospects with Drysdale and stuff. I think Anaheim is kind of should be in a few years on that up and up. Like I don't think they are at the start of a rebuild. I think they're kind of midway. Like I'd say maybe 3/4 through the rebuild. Like I think in a few years here they're going to want to start adding some pieces and maybe actually start getting better and better. I know it's hard to say because they're bottom of the league, but I truthfully don't think, and I think with the prospects they have, that they're not too far off. They're still maybe a few, like 3 years away, and I don't think that's that bad. One team, the next one here that I'm a little bit iffy on is Columbus. I do think he could be cool there with Gaudreau and Laine and Kent Johnson and just all the good young players they have. I just feel like I would rather Anaheim over Columbus simply because I feel like Columbus is further behind in their rebuild. Like Columbus maybe is 4 years away from actually competing. I could be mistaken. Like I could be wrong. Maybe Columbus is less and maybe they're going to be like 2 years away. This is just kind of my feeling. I feel like Columbus will not be as good as Anaheim in shorter span, if that makes any sense. And that's why this next team is just a no-go for me. That's the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, being a Canucks fan, I obviously have some sort of hatred to Chicago. That's not strictly why. That's obviously some part of it, but that is not strictly why I don't want Bedard to go there. I personally just think Chicago's at the start of their rebuild. I mean, they still have Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews, so like they still have those players. So it's going to be hard for them to fully rebuild with them still. They're still trying, but I personally feel like Chicago is so far away from being good again that Connor Bedard's just going to waste like 4 or 5 years of his starting career in Chicago, where obviously he's going to get first line minutes, but they're not going to do anything. He's going to be just wasted away. And I don't want to see that. Like that's the number one thing I hate about the draft, is that the best player goes to the worst team. It obviously makes sense, but then they just don't get to play. You don't get to see them in playoff games for a while until this team actually gets good, if they get good. And unfortunately for Chicago, I just think they're at the start of a rebuild that it's tough. Okay, the San Jose Sharks are in a very, very similar boat to Chicago, if not worse. They're bad, but they still have so many old players and they don't have a lot of prospects. So I would not like him to go to San Jose. I think San Jose is going to be probably one of the longest when it comes to a team that goes from the bottom and rises back up. I think this team's just going to start seeing a decline. Like the only reason they're not dead last, in my opinion, is probably due to Erik Karlsson just having an unreal performance. Especially if they trade Timo Meier. Obviously that's a start towards them rebuilding. They're going to get some good pieces back. But they're just still so far out, in my opinion, from actually being a competitive team and just like a team that can make the playoffs, that Bedard would just be wasting 6 years, 7 years, who knows how long, until they are good again. Okay, now we get into the good stuff. The Vancouver Canucks. We are 28th in the league. We are in the bottom 5, barely. Arizona's right above us. Would I like Connor Bedard to come to Vancouver? Obviously. Biasly speaking, obviously. Unbiasedly, I think there's some pros and cons to him coming to Vancouver. Obviously, Vancouver has had its drama this year, and I wouldn't want to put him in a situation like this where it's just drama filled, and I wouldn't want to kill his vibe. But also, on the grand scheme of things, he also is a Vancouver Canucks fan, so maybe he looks past all of that. He's just proud to wear the jersey that he grew up watching. So that could also be a counter argument to that. I do think him on this team would be gross. Vancouver has no problem scoring goals, and Connor Bedard would just add to that. In my opinion, the Vancouver Canucks are not as far out as people talk about, and I think we are a few defensemen away from actually being able to somewhat compete. And obviously, if you add Bedard up there on your forward group, you can dish out some more forwards and you'll be okay. I would obviously be okay. Arizona is next, and that's another team I think I'd be okay with Connor Bedard going to, believe it or not. I think Arizona needs some more hype. Arizona's just kind of that team that's in the league. People forget about them. I mean, they're playing in a college arena. But I think Connor Bedard would be sick to add to that forward group that they have. Their prospects in general are just unreal. Like, I think Arizona in a few years' time will be a good team. Like, I personally, my timeline on Arizona is 3 to 4 years. And I think this team will be competing for a playoff spot. I'm not saying they're going to win the Stanley Cup, but I think then they will be competing for a playoff spot. If they get Connor Bedard, heck, that might even jump to 2 to 3 years instead of 3 to 4. Next is Montreal. I don't know how I feel about this. I'm kind of iffy on Montreal and if I would be okay with Connor Bedard going there. I think Montreal is... it's hard to tell if Montreal's at the start of a rebuild or the end of a rebuild, because Montreal went to the finals, then they've just been terrible since, and they haven't really been selling. Like, they still have Brendan Gallagher, they still have a lot of pieces. So I'm pretty sure they traded Jeff Petrie last year, but I mean, like, to me, they just don't feel like they're selling. I feel like they're just riding. They're just coasting, you know, just seeing what happens, seeing if some players develop, seeing where they end up. They're not really like offloading everybody, at least not yet. Maybe we'll see what happens at the deadline, but I do think Connor Bedard would be pretty sick with Cole Caulfield, I have to admit. St. Louis Blues would be a team Connor Bedard would be fire on. St. Louis is my second favorite team, so I'm trying not to speak biasly here, but man, I think him, Jordan Kyrou, Robert Thomas, Buchnevich, like, I think this team would be gross. I'm surprised this team's as bad as they are. I think they're kind of falling into what the Canucks are struggling with right now, and that's a lack of defense. St. Louis defense is just terrible. So maybe Connor Bedard doesn't help him in that aspect, but I mean, any team Bedard goes to is instantly going to make them better. So I could see him fitting in really well in St. Louis. Philadelphia, they're in 24th, and man, would I not want Connor Bedard to go to Philadelphia. I think they're another team that's just entering a rebuild that they're going to be bad for a very, very long time. They have a lot of bad contracts and older players that they're going to have to hold on to pretty much until these contracts are done, or until it's in the final like few years. I just don't see them trading these guys at all. Then I'm pretty sure the last team that can jump up and get Connor Bedard, because I think you can only move up 10 spots, is the Ottawa Senators, who sit at 23rd in the NHL. This would actually be nasty, because Ottawa's not even that bad. Like, they have a lot of good young players. They're an up-and-coming team that it would just actually be unfair and kind of gross if he was to join Ottawa with DeBrincat, Tkachuk, Norris, Batherson. Like, it would be over. Like, it would actually be gross. So yes, I think I would like to see that. But there you guys have it. That's my opinion on every single team that right now currently can get Connor Bedard. Which teams I would like him to go to, which ones I wouldn't. Obviously, number one is Vancouver. That's my team. I would absolutely lose my mind if that did happen. Unbiasedly, whether your team's good or bad, what team would you like to see Connor Bedard go to? Comment down below and let me know. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe and like the video if you enjoyed. I'll talk to you in the next one. Peace.